The holoscreen flickered to life, bathing the lecture hall in the crimson glow of Dragana 7's sulfur plains. Professor Khazar, a stern Rigelian with pale blue skin and eyes that seemed permanently narrowed in judgment, stepped into the light with a theatrical flourish. "Welcome to Advanced Xenobiology Class 5 Deathworld Fauna," he announced, his voice carrying to the uppermost tiers of the amphitheater. "If you're looking for an easy credit, I suggest you leave now. This course will challenge everything you think you know about survival, adaptation, and what constitutes life in the harshest environments the galaxy has to offer." Averin Lee shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clutching her data pad with fingers that betrayed the slightest tremor. Second-year students at the Galactic Preparatory Academy were expected to maintain a certain composure, especially those specializing in xenobiology. But Averin had grown up on New Haven, a temperate agricultural world where the most dangerous indigenous creature was a burrowing rodent with mildly venomous teeth. Nothing in her upbringing had prepared her for the footage now scrolling across the holoscreen. Creatures with exoskeletons that could withstand lava flows. Predators with acid for blood. Parasites that hijacked nervous systems. "You okay?" whispered Milo Thane from the seat beside her. His round face was framed by unruly curls, eyes kind behind thick-lensed spectacles, a deliberate affectation that Averin found endearing. Milo preferred ancient technologies. He claimed they kept him grounded. "Fine," Averin murmured back, "just processing." From the row behind them came a derisive snort. Jex Morrow leaned forward, his sharp features twisted into a smirk. "Processing? It's just data, Lee. Not like these things are in the room with us." Professor Khazar cleared his throat pointedly. Since candidate Morrow seemed so eager to participate, perhaps he'd like to explain why Dragana 7 is classified as a Class 5 death world despite being technically habitable. Jex straightened, caught off guard but recovering quickly. Atmospheric composition is within tolerance ranges for most carbon-based life, but the planet's proximity to its binary stars creates extreme temperature fluctuations, which in turn have driven evolutionary adaptations that are particularly aggressive. "Correct, if somewhat simplistic," Khazar replied. "Let's examine those particularly aggressive adaptations more closely, shall we?" The holoscreen shifted, and suddenly the lecture hall was filled with three-dimensional projections of Dragana 7's apex predators. A six-limbed feline creature prowled between the front rows, its translucent skin revealing a pulsing circulatory system filled with something that wasn't quite blood. A swarm of insectoid organisms flowed over the ceiling, each one no larger than a fingernail but moving with disturbing coordination. And in the center aisle, a bipedal entity unfolded itself from a compact crouch to stand nearly 3 meters tall, its exoskeleton segmented like ancient Terran armor. Face a blank mask with sensory pits where eyes should be. "The Draganis Stalker," Khazar announced, gesturing to the bipedal creature. "Perhaps the most remarkable example of convergent evolution we've encountered. Despite no genetic relationship to humanoids, it has developed a form that superficially resembles our own. This is not mimicry. Rather, it represents the efficiency of the bipedal form for a certain type of ambush predator." Averin found herself staring at the creature's blank face. Something about its stillness triggered a primal unease in her hindbrain, a warning from ancestors who had once been prey. She barely registered the sudden flicker of the lights, the momentary dimming of the holographic projections. When the system stabilized, Professor Khazar continued as if nothing had happened. But Averin, always attentive to details, noticed something odd in the back row where a cluster of transfer students from the Tau Ceti Institute had been sitting. An empty seat now gaped, The quiet, human-looking exchange student who had occupied it was gone. A faint scuttling sound echoed from somewhere behind the class. Averin turned, scanning the back of the lecture hall, but saw nothing unusual. When she faced forward again, she caught Milo watching her with raised eyebrows. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "I hear what?" he replied, but Professor Kazar was already moving on, the holograms fading as he switched to a diagram of Dragana 7's ecological zones. "Your first assignment," Kazar announced, "will be to select one of these zones and prepare a survival strategy for a hypothetical research expedition. You will work in pairs." His gaze swept the room, landing on Averin. "Candidate Lee, since you seem so alert today, you'll be partnered with Candidate Morrow." Jex's groan was audible. Averin's heart sank, but she maintained a neutral expression. Working with the most competitive student in their cohort would be challenging, but perhaps it was an opportunity to prove herself. As the class ended and students began filing out, Averin lingered, watching the back row. Something felt wrong, but she couldn't place it. The scuttling sound had not repeated, and she was beginning to wonder if she'd imagined it. "Coming to the Commons?" Milo asked, gathering his antique notebook, actual paper, a luxury on space stations. "In a minute," Averin replied. "I want to check something first." After the hall had emptied, she approached the back row, examining the seat where the exchange student had been sitting. Nothing seemed out of place, yet when she touched the surface, her fingers came away with a faint, oily residue that caught the light with an iridescent sheen. In the corridor outside, she noticed something else, a set of unusual indentations in the metal flooring, spaced at regular intervals. 6 points in a circular pattern, as if made by a creature with radially arranged limbs, or perhaps 6 toes. The edges of each depression showed a slight discoloration, as if the metal had been etched by mild acid. Averin felt a chill crawl up her spine. That night, sleep eluded her. The dormitory pod hummed with the station's life support systems, a sound that usually lulled her to unconsciousness but now seemed to mask other, more sinister noises. Every creak of the structure, every distant thump of maintenance drones set her nerves on edge. Her academic console chimed with an incoming message. Milo, still awake despite the late hour. Checked the class roster. His text read, "The exchange student who disappeared was listed as J. Smith from Tau Ceti, but I accessed the Tau Institute database. No J. Smith enrolled this term." Averin's fingers hovered over the reply function. Should she share her discoveries from the lecture hall? Or was she overreacting, seeing patterns where none existed? Guilt flickered through her. Memories of the lab accident back home, the one she'd survived while 2 classmates hadn't. The academy counselors had warned her about hypervigilance, about seeing danger in harmless situations. But those footprints hadn't been harmless. "Meet me before class tomorrow," she typed back. "I found something strange." Morning brought no clarity. The station's artificial daylight cycle illuminated the Commons, where students from dozens of worlds gathered to fuel themselves for the day's studies. Averin spotted Milo at their usual table, but was surprised to see Jex sitting with him, their heads bent close in conversation. "You told him?" Averin asked as she slid into her seat, not bothering to hide her annoyance. Milo had the grace to look apologetic. "He overheard me reviewing the roster, and he has access to security logs that might help." Jex regarded her with his typical arrogance, but there was something else in his expression, a hint of genuine concern. "If there's an unregistered entity on this station, it's everyone's problem," he said. "Especially if it's from a Deathworld." "We don't know that," Averin cautioned. "It could be a registration error, or it could be exactly what you're afraid to say." Jex interrupted. A non-human predator that somehow passed as a student. Those footprints you found? I checked them this morning and they're gone. The corridor's been resurfaced. Milo's eyes widened. Someone's covering it up? Or something is, Jex said, lowering his voice. I've accessed the surveillance feeds from the past week. There are gaps, Averin, specific sections missing, all around the East Wing dormitories, where the exchange students are housed. A cold weight settled in Averin's stomach. The East Wing was adjacent to the xenobiology labs, with their extensive collection of specimens from across the galaxy, including samples from Draganis 7. We should report this, she said. Jex shook his head. To who? Security? Administration? Without proof, we'd just sound paranoid. And if there is something dangerous loose on this station, alerting authorities might drive it into hiding, or provoke it. So what do you suggest? A grim smile spread across Jex's face. We find it first. Professor Kazar's lecture that day focused on the sensory adaptations of Deathworld fauna. Averin found it difficult to concentrate, her attention constantly drawn to the empty seat in the back row and the exits from the hall. She noticed that Jex, too, seemed distracted, his gaze frequently sweeping the room. The most successful predators, Kazar was saying, adapt not just physically but behaviorally. They learn, they problem solve. The Draganis stalker, for instance, has demonstrated tool use in controlled studies, as well as an understanding of technological barriers such as force fields. A student raised her hand. Is it true they can mimic other species? Kazar's expression soured slightly. That's a common misconception, likely stemming from early colonists' reports of seeing familiar shapes before attacks. The stalker does not physically transform. That would violate conservation of mass, among other biological principles. What it does possess is a remarkable ability to contort its body and create visual camouflage through specialized chromatophores in its exoskeleton. But they look humanoid, the student persisted. Econvergent evolution, Kazar corrected. They evolved a similar body plan independently, much as dolphins and ichthyosaurs did on ancient Earth. The bipedal form is efficient for certain environmental niches. Averin raised her hand, surprising herself. Could a stalker survive in a space station environment? The professor regarded her with new interest. Theoretically, yes. They are extraordinarily adaptable and can enter a state of metabolic dormancy when resources are scarce. However, he added with a touch of amusement, I assure you there are none aboard this station. Our containment protocols for specimens are state-of-the-art. As if triggered by his words. The lights flickered again. This time, the dimming lasted several seconds, and when illumination returned, Averin could have sworn she saw movement in her peripheral vision. Something long and segmented retreating into a ventilation shaft. After class, she, Milo, and Jex gathered in a quiet corner of the commons to compare notes. The security logs show another gap during today's lecture, Jex reported. Exactly when the lights flickered, Milo looked troubled. I've been reviewing the station's power consumption records. There have been unexplained surges in the East Wing, specifically around the environmental controls. What would a Deathworld predator want with environmental controls? Averin wondered aloud. To make conditions more hospitable to itself, Jex suggested, or less hospitable to us. The thought sent a chill through the group. Milo nervously adjusted his spectacles. We need more information before we panic. If there is a Draganis creature aboard, we should understand its capabilities. The specimens in the lab, Averin said suddenly. They'd have detailed scans, biological data. The lab requires faculty clearance, Jex pointed out. Averin's expression hardened with determination. Then we'll have to find another way in. That evening, after curfew, the three students made their way through the dimly lit corridors of the station's academic wing. Jex had managed to loop a section of the security feed, giving them a narrow window to access the xenobiology lab without being detected. 15 minutes, he whispered as Milo bypassed the lab's electronic lock. That's all we have before the system resets. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the darkened laboratory beyond. Rows of specimen containers lined the walls, some glowing faintly with their own bioluminescence. In the center of the room, holographic workstations stood ready for student use during daylight hours. Milo, access the database, Averin directed. Jex, watch the door. I'll find the Dragonis specimens. They moved quickly, each to their assigned task. Averin navigated the specimen library, searching for the distinctive marking of Deathworld samples. Near the back, in a section marked with the highest containment protocols, she found what she was looking for, a series of sealed containers bearing the warning symbol for Dragonis Sedna. I got it, she called softly, examining the specimens through their transparent walls. Tissue samples, preserved parasites, and what appeared to be a segment of exoskeleton, likely from a juvenile stalker. Milo looked up from the workstation. I've accessed the files. There's extensive data on the stalker's biology. I download everything, Jex urged from his position by the door. We're running out of time. As Milo worked, Averin studied the exoskeleton fragment more closely. Something about it troubled her. The catalog information indicated it had been collected 3 standard months ago, yet it showed no signs of deterioration. If anything, it appeared to be regenerating? Milo, she said, her voice tight. Check the containment logs for this specimen. Has it been accessed recently? Milo's fingers flew over the holographic interface. According to the log, no. It's been in continuous containment since arrival. He paused, frowning. But there's an anomaly in the mass readings. It's lighter than initial measurements indicated. A soft sound came from above, the faint scrape of something moving through the ventilation system. All 3 students froze, looking up at the ceiling panels. Time's up, Jex hissed. We need to go, now! They retreated from the lab, Milo clutching his datapad with the downloaded files. As the door sealed behind them, Averin could have sworn she heard a soft, chittering laugh from the darkness beyond. Back in Milo's dormitory pod, they reviewed their findings. The holographic display from his datapad filled the small space with anatomical diagrams of the Dragonis stalker, its reinforced skeleton, its redundant organs, its sensory apparatus so different from their own. It says here they can detect electrical fields, Milo read. They use it to track prey through solid barriers. And this, Averin added, pointing to another section, about their digestive system. They don't just consume prey, they absorb useful genetic material, incorporating it into their own biology. Jex, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke. Could they absorb enough human DNA to pass as one of us? The question hung in the air, uncomfortable and frightening in its implications. Physically impossible, Milo said, but his voice lacked conviction. The mass difference alone. Oh, but what if they don't need to fully transform? Averin interrupted, a terrible idea taking shape. What if they only need to project the appearance? Professor Kazar mentioned chromatophores, specialized cells for camouflage. A visual camouflage wouldn't fool biometric scanners, Jex argued. Unless someone had already bypassed those scanners, Averin countered. Someone with access to security systems. She looked pointedly at Jex. He stiffened. What exactly are you implying? Nothing. Yet. Averin turned back to the data. But we need to be careful about who we trust. The night passed in uneasy research. They learned that the stalker possessed remarkable regenerative abilities, could survive in near-vacuum conditions for short periods, and had specialized organs for storing energy during dormant phases. Most disturbing was the species' intelligence rating, comparable to higher primates, with problem-solving skills that bordered on sapience. "This doesn't make sense," Milo said as dawn approached. "If there is a stalker aboard, why hasn't it attacked anyone? Its natural behavior pattern is predatory." "Maybe it's not hungry," Jex suggested dryly. Averin shook her head. "Or maybe it has a different objective. These creatures evolved in an environment where resources are scarce and competition is fierce. Survival requires more than just feeding. It requires strategy." The station's morning alert sounded, signaling the start of the day cycle. Exhausted but determined, the three made a plan to continue their investigation after classes. As they entered Professor Kazar's lecture hall, Averin noted that the back row remained empty. No sign of the mysterious exchange student, nor any new faces that might represent another disguise. But when she glanced at the professor's podium, a new chill ran through her. Beside Kazar's usual teaching materials lay an unfamiliar object, a small, metallic device with an organic-looking interface. Throughout the lecture, Averin couldn't take her eyes off the device. It seemed to pulse occasionally, as if responding to the professor's proximity. When Kazar activated the holographic display, she noticed that the device emitted a brief flash of light, perfectly synchronized with the system's activation. After class, she approached the podium, pretending to have a question about the assignment. Up close, she could see that the device's surface was textured like exoskeleton. "Professor," she said, careful to keep her voice steady, "I was wondering about your lecture yesterday, on mimicry versus convergent evolution." Kazar regarded her with his usual stern expression. "What about it? You mentioned that stalkers can't physically transform, but could they potentially create technology that helps them blend in? Devices that might, for instance, interfere with our perception or with security systems?" The professor's eyes narrowed. "That's a rather specific question. Candidate Lee, is there a reason for your interest?" Averin hesitated. Should she confide her suspicions? Kazar was an authority figure, someone who should be informed of potential dangers. But something held her back, the device on his podium, his dismissive attitude toward the possibility of danger. "It's just scientific curiosity," she replied. "Then I suggest you focus that curiosity on your assigned work," Kazar said coldly. "Your partnership with candidate Morrow has produced disappointing results so far." Chastened, Averin retreated. As she left the lecture hall, she noticed Jex lingering near the exit, watching her interaction with the professor with undisguised interest. "You learn anything?" he asked as they walked together toward the commons. "Nothing concrete," she admitted. "But did you notice that device on his podium? I've never seen him use it before." Jex nodded. "I noticed, and I've been thinking about what you said last night about being careful who we trust." He hesitated, then continued in a lower voice. "I've checked Kazar's credentials. He's legitimate, been teaching here for years. But his research focus changed recently. Until 6 months ago, he specialized in temperate world ecosystems. Then suddenly, he's the Academy's expert on Deathworld fauna." Averin processed this information. People change research interests all the time. "Sure," Jex agreed. "But they don't usually destroy all their previous work in the process. I tried to access his earlier papers. They've been wiped from the Academy database. The implications were disturbing. Was Professor Kazar somehow involved with whatever was happening on the station? Or was he another victim, his identity possibly compromised? Before they could discuss it further, An alarm blared throughout the corridor, the distinctive tone of a containment breach. Emergency lights pulsed red, and a computerized voice echoed from the station's communication system. Attention all personnel. Containment breach in Xenobiology Lab 3. Hazardous organism release detected, and please proceed to secure areas until further notice. Students and faculty rushed through the corridors, some panicked, others maintaining the composed efficiency expected of future space professionals. Averin saw Milo pushing against the crowd, making his way toward her. "Averin," he called, "the specimen we examined last night, it's gone." Security officers appeared, directing the flow of evacuating personnel. Among them, Averin recognized a senior administrator, Director Voss, her severe features tense with controlled alarm. "All students return to dormitory wings," she ordered. "Faculty to emergency stations. This is not a drill." As Averin, Milo, and Jex were swept along with the crowd, a flicker of movement caught Averin's eye, a shadowy figure slipping into a maintenance access way, moving with unnatural fluidity. She grabbed Milo's arm, pointing, but by the time he looked, the figure had vanished. The lockdown lasted through the night cycle, confined to their dormitory wing. Students clustered in common areas, sharing rumors and speculation. Some claimed a dangerous experiment had gone wrong. Others whispered about sabotage from rival academies. No one mentioned the possibility of a Deathworld predator loose on the station, but Averin could see the fear in their eyes, the primal recognition that something was hunting them. In Milo's pod, their small group had expanded to include Talia Nyota, a fourth-year student with security clearance who had overheard them discussing the missing specimen. It wasn't just one specimen that disappeared, Talia informed them. Her voice hushed despite the privacy field Milo had activated around the pod. 3 containment units were breached, and there's something else. The environmental controls for the entire East Wing have been recalibrated. Temperature up 5 degrees. Humidity increased to nearly 90%, creating conditions similar to Dragana 7's lowland regions. Averin realized. But why? Milo wondered. If the stalker has been hiding among us, it's obviously adapted to station conditions. Jex, who had been unusually subdued, spoke up. Unless it's preparing for something that requires its full biological capabilities. Something that would be easier in its natural environment. Like what? Talia asked. Jex's expression was grim. Reproduction. The word fell like a stone in still water, sending ripples of horror through the group. One stalker was a threat. A breeding population would be catastrophic. We need to alert the administration, Talia insisted, if there's even a chance. And tell them what? Jex demanded. That we illegally accessed lab specimens and now think there's an alien predator preparing to spawn? Without proof, they'll just add us to the list of hysterical students. Then we get proof, Averin decided. The environmental changes are centered in the East Wing. That's where we'll find it, or them. The East Wing is locked down, Milo pointed out. Security teams are scanning section by section. A determined expression settled on Averin's face. There's another way in. Through the Arboretum Dome. The others stared at her in disbelief. The dome is filled with dragonous flora. Jex protested. Acid mist spore pods, razor leaf shrubs. It's a death trap. Exactly, Averin said. Which means it's the perfect hiding place for something that evolved to thrive in those conditions. And the dome connects to the East Wing through the ventilation system. Milo looked skeptical. Even if you're right, how would we get into the dome? It's restricted to faculty and research assistants. Averin turned to Talia. That's where you come in. With Talia's security clearance and Jex's ability to manipulate the surveillance system, they managed to access the Arboretum Dome during the night cycle. The vast chamber rose 3 levels high, its transparent ceiling revealing the stars beyond. Inside, the environment of Draganis 7th had been meticulously recreated. Red-hued vegetation grew in dense tangles. Delicate spore pods released their glittering mists into the humid air, and the rich, loamy soil steamed with geothermal heat. The 4 students wore protective gear borrowed from a maintenance bay, not as specialized as proper Deathworld equipment, but sufficient for a brief excursion. Their breath fogged the inside of their helmets as they moved cautiously among the alien flora. "The ventilation access is on the far side," Talia whispered, though their comm system made whispering unnecessary. "Behind the sulfur pools." They picked their way forward, alert for any movement among the vegetation. Milo had jury-rigged his datapad to function as a biosonar, calibrated to detect the specific density and mass of a stalker's exoskeleton. So far, it had remained silent. "I don't like this," Jex muttered. "It's too quiet." He was right. Despite the dome's diverse ecosystem, there were no sounds of insect analogs, no rustling of smaller organisms moving through the undergrowth. The entire environment seemed to be holding its breath. They reached the sulfur pools, bubbling depressions filled with viscous yellow liquid that released acrid fumes into the air. Beyond them, partially concealed by a cluster of tall, fern-like plants, was the ventilation access panel. "In there," Talia pointed, "and we just need to bypass the security lock and—" A harsh tone from Milo's datapad cut her off. The biosonar had detected something, a mass reading consistent with their target, moving rapidly toward their position. "It's coming from the ventilation shaft," Milo reported, his voice tight with fear. They backed away from the access panel, forming a defensive circle. Jex pulled out a makeshift weapon, a maintenance tool modified to deliver an electrical charge. Averin had her own preparation, a vial of paralytic toxin she'd synthesized based on the stalker's biological data, loaded into a pressure injector. The ventilation panel burst outward with explosive force, and a dark shape launched itself into the dome. It moved too quickly to track, a blur of segmented limbs and gleaming exoskeleton that vanished into the dense vegetation. "Did you see it?" Talia gasped. "Spread out," Averin commanded, surprising herself with her steady voice. "We need to drive it into the open." They moved apart, creating a loose semicircle that would force the creature toward the center of the dome if it tried to circle behind them. Averin's heart hammered in her chest, but her mind was clear, focused on the hunt. This was what she had feared back on New Haven, true danger, a test of survival, yet now that she faced it, she found a core of steel within herself. A rustle to her left, Jex shouted a warning as something erupted from the undergrowth. But it wasn't the stalker. A smaller creature, one of the dome's maintenance species, fled from an unseen threat. "It's herding the native fauna," Milo realized, "driving them toward us as a distraction." Averin narrowed her eyes, scanning the vegetation. Intelligence, strategy. The stalker was demonstrating exactly the capabilities that made it apex predator on its homeworld. Then she saw it. Not a blur of motion this time, but a stillness that didn't belong. A section of the dome's wall that seemed to ripple slightly, its texture not quite matching the surrounding metal. "There," she breathed into her comm. "By the eastern wall. It's using camouflage." Jex, closest to the position she'd indicated, turned slowly. "I don't see—" The camouflage dropped, and the stalker revealed itself in its full, terrifying glory. Over 3 meters tall, its segmented exoskeleton gleaming with iridescent highlights. 6-digited limbs unfolding from a body that had compressed itself into an impossibly compact form. Its face was exactly as the hologram had shown, a blank mask with sensory pits arranged in a pattern that unnervingly suggested eyes and a mouth. Jex froze, his modified weapon half raised. The stalker regarded him with an alien stillness, its sensory pits pulsing slightly as it processed his presence. Then it spoke. "You seek knowledge," it said, its voice a discordant blend of tones that somehow formed words. "As do I." Shock rendered them all momentarily speechless. The creature before them wasn't just intelligent, it was sapient, capable of language. Averin was the first to recover. "What knowledge do you seek?" she asked, her finger poised over the trigger of the paralytic injector. The stalker's body shifted, segments realigning in a motion that might have been the equivalent of a shrug. "Understanding of those who study us, those who classify us as monsters while knowing nothing of our world." "You infiltrated our academy," Talia accused. "Disguised yourself as a student." "I became a student," the stalker corrected. "Your definition is too narrow. Learning is not exclusive to your species." Averin's mind raced. This changed everything. Or did it? A sapient predator was still a predator. The creature had breached containment, stolen specimens, altered station systems. "Why reveal yourself now?" she demanded. The stalker's sensory pits pulsed more rapidly. "Because you were close to finding me anyway. Because you, unlike the others, showed genuine curiosity rather than fear. And because..." It made a gesture toward the ventilation shaft. "Time grows short." "The environmental changes," Milo said, understanding dawning. "You weren't preparing to reproduce. You were creating a suitable environment for communication," the stalker confirmed. "Your atmosphere is painful for extended vocalization." Jex, who had remained frozen, suddenly moved, not to attack, but to lower his weapon. "You've been watching us, studying us, just as we study your kind." "Yes." The stalker's body language shifted, becoming more fluid, less threatening. "Your professor speaks of my species with knowledge gleaned from specimens and remote observation. I wish to understand if all humans shared his limited perspective." Averin felt a prickle of unease. "Professor Khazar, what do you know about him?" The stalker emitted a sound that might have been laughter. "I know that he is not what he appears to be, just as I am not. But his deception serves a different purpose." Before Averin could press for clarification, the dome's emergency lights flashed on. A security override had been activated. Someone was entering. "They found us," Talia hissed. The stalker's posture changed instantly, reverting to a predatory stance. "They will attempt to capture or kill me. I cannot allow that." "Wait," Averin urged, making a decision that went against all her training but felt undeniably right. "We can help you. There are protocols for first contact with sapient species, laws that would protect you. If they recognize my sapience," the stalker countered. "Your professor has worked hard to ensure that doesn't happen." The dome's main entrance was opening. They had seconds at most. "Trust me," Averin said, holding the stalker's alien gaze. "But we need a distraction." Jex stepped forward. "I'll draw their attention. The rest of you get to the ventilation shaft." "Jex, no," Averin began, but he cut her off. "I've been competing with you since first year. Let me win at something noble for once." Before she could protest further, he dashed toward the entrance, shouting and waving his arms. The security team that entered, led by Director Voss and, surprisingly, Professor Khazar, immediately focused on him. "The creature's loose in the dome," Jex yelled. "It attacked us, this way!" As the security team followed Jex deeper into the dome, Averin, Milo, and Talia guided the stalker toward the ventilation shaft. The alien moved with liquid grace, adapting its bulk to the confined space with ease. "Why is Professor Khazar here?" Milo whispered. "He's xenobiology, not security." Because he has a personal interest, the stalker replied, its voice now a barely audible hiss. He fears what I might reveal. They reached the shaft. The stalker began to fold itself into the opening but paused, turning its sensory pits toward Averin. Your kind named my world Dragana 7, after the human who claimed to discover it. It said, we call it Kithar, home. Remember that, Averin Lee, when you speak of us. With that, it compressed its body in that impossible way and slipped into the shaft, vanishing from sight. Moments later, shouts erupted from across the dome. Jex had apparently led the security team in a complete circle, and they now spotted the remaining students by the ventilation access. Candidate Lee, Professor Khazar's voice carried across the dome, sharp with authority. Step away from that shaft immediately. The three students turned to face the approaching security team. Director Voss looked furious, her hand on her sidearm. But it was Khazar who worried Averin most. The professor's normally composed features were twisted with something that looked suspiciously like fear. Professor, Averin said, injecting calm confidence into her voice. We've just made first contact with a sapient species. The Draganis stalker is not just an animal. It's intelligent, capable of language. Nonsense, Khazar snapped. The creature has clearly affected your perception. It employs pheromones to confuse prey. Then why did it spare us? Milo challenged. We were at its mercy, yet it chose to communicate instead. Director Voss looked between them and Khazar, her expression calculating. If there's even a chance of sapience, there are protocols. Protocols based on verified evidence, Khazar interrupted. Not the hallucinations of students who shouldn't even be in this dome. Jex joined them, slightly out of breath from his diversion. We have evidence, he said. Milo's datapad recorded everything. Audio, visual, biological readings. Khazar's expression darkened further. Hand over that device immediately. No, Averin said, stepping between Milo and the professor. Not until we understand why you're so determined to classify the stalkers as non-sapient despite evidence to the contrary. Not until we know why your research focus changed so abruptly 6 months ago. A tense silence followed her words. The security officers looked to Director Voss for guidance, while Khazar seemed to be calculating his options. Finally, Voss spoke. Everyone stand down. Candidate Lee. Explain exactly what happened here. Averin told the truth, how they had suspected an infiltration, tracked the creature to the dome, and discovered its capacity for language and reason. She omitted their illegal access to lab specimens but emphasized the stalker's claim about Khazar. It said the professor wasn't what he appeared to be. She concluded that he had reasons for ensuring the stalkers were classified as non-sapient. All eyes turned to Khazar, who had grown increasingly pale during Averin's account. Ridiculous, he sputtered. The creature was manipulating you, obviously, and it's a known hunting tactic of what exactly, Professor? Came a new voice. From the dome entrance, a tall figure approached, Dr. Eleanor Vask, the Academy's chancellor. Because according to all published research before your arrival, no one had ever heard a Draganis stalker speak. Khazar's composure cracked. Chancellor, I can explain. I certainly hope so, Vask replied coldly. Because I've just received a most interesting transmission from the Tau Ceti Institute. It seems they never sent an exchange student named J. Smith. Furthermore, your credentials from the Xenobiological Congress appear to have been falsified. The professor's hand moved suddenly to his pocket, but security was faster. 2 officers restrained him while a third removed a small device similar to the one Averin had noticed on his podium. What is that? Voss demanded. A communication jammer, one officer reported after scanning it. specifically calibrated to block non-human frequency ranges. Chancellor Vask's expression hardened. Take Professor Kazar to detention. I want a full investigation into his activities and access to all his research data. She turned to the students. As for you four, while your actions were unauthorized and dangerous, they may have exposed something of great importance. Report to my office in 1 hour. As Kazar was led away, he fixed Averin with a venomous glare. You have no idea what you've done, he hissed. Those creatures are not what you think. They're manipulating you, just as they've manipulated others. The only manipulation I've seen, Averin replied steadily, is your attempt to suppress the truth about a sapient species. After the security team departed with Kazar, Chancellor Vask approached the 4 students who remained in the dome. That creature, she said quietly, where is it now? Averin hesitated, then decided on honesty. It escaped through the ventilation system, but Chancellor, it had multiple opportunities to harm us and chose not to. I believe it truly came here to learn, not to hunt. Vask studied her thoughtfully. A bold claim, Candidate Lee, and one with significant implications if true. She gestured toward the exit. Come. We have much to discuss about first contact protocols and your future roles in this developing situation. In the following days, the Galactic Preparatory Academy was transformed. Security remained high, but the focus shifted from containment to communication. Chancellor Vask established a special task force to review all data on Draganis 7th and to attempt peaceful contact with the Stalker, should it still be on the station. Investigation revealed that the real Professor Kazar had been intercepted en route to the Academy 6 months earlier. His identity assumed by a representative of a private corporation with mining interests on Draganis 70. The imposter had been systematically altering research data to ensure the planet's indigenous life was classified as non-sapient, a classification that would allow unrestricted resource extraction under Galactic Council law. 1 week after the confrontation in the dome, Averin was summoned to the Chancellor's office. To her surprise, Jex, Milo, and Talia were already there, along with Director Voss. Candidate Lee. Chancellor Vask greeted her. We've reviewed your account of the encounter, as well as the recordings from Candidate Thane's datapad. The evidence strongly suggests you've made first contact with a previously unrecognized sapient species. Averin felt a surge of vindication, but Vask wasn't finished. And this presents us with both an opportunity and a responsibility. The Galactic Council has authorized a proper first contact mission to Draganis 7, or Kithar, as you reported its native name to be. And they've requested that you 4 be part of that mission, under the supervision of qualified xenobiologists. Jex, who had been uncharacteristically subdued since the dome incident, looked up in surprise. Us? But we're still students. Students who showed remarkable insight and courage, Voss acknowledged. Though your methods were unorthodox. What about the stalker that was here? Milo asked. Has there been any sign of it? Vask exchanged a glance with Voss. No confirmed sightings. However, there have been reports of unusual access to our database, specifically downloads of cultural and historical data about human societies. It's still learning about us, Averin said softly. So it would seem. Vask handed each of them a datapad. These contain your preliminary assignments for the mission. You'll continue your studies, but with a specialized focus on preparation for diplomatic contact. As they left the Chancellor's office, Jex fell into step beside Averin. The arrogance that had defined him seemed diminished, replaced by a thoughtfulness she hadn't seen before. That night in the dome, he said quietly, when I created the diversion, I saw something you didn't. Averin looked at him questioningly. When the security team entered, the stalker could have escaped immediately. It was fast enough. But it hesitated when it saw Khazar, not with fear, but with recognition. Jex paused. I think they knew each other. The implication was disturbing. Had the false Khazar been involved with the stalker before? Was there more to the creature's presence on the station than it had revealed? Do you think we should tell Chancellor Vask? Averin asked. Jex considered this. Not yet. Not until we understand more. He smiled faintly. Besides, I find I'm actually looking forward to learning about a culture that evolved in conditions we consider hostile. Maybe Deathworld says more about our limitations than theirs. The observation struck Averin as surprisingly insightful, especially coming from Jex. Perhaps the encounter had changed him as much as it had changed her. In the following months, preparations for the mission intensified. The Academy's curriculum was adjusted to include a new course on ethics of Deathworld research, taught by Dr. Helena Mori, an expert in interspecies diplomacy. Averin threw herself into her studies with renewed purpose, driven by the knowledge that she would soon return to Dragana 7, to Kithar, not as a student observer but as a representative of humanity. The night before their departure, Averin visited the Arboretum Dome one last time. The alien flora continued its cycle of growth and decay, beautiful in its alien way. She walked to the spot where they had encountered the stalker, remembering its strange, multi-toned voice and the way it had spoken of home. A soft sound behind her made her turn. For a moment, she thought she saw a familiar shape, tall, segmented, with sensory pits that caught the dim light. But when she blinked, there was nothing there except the gently swaying vegetation. Still, as she left the dome, Averin couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, not with hostility, but with the same curiosity that drove her own explorations. She smiled to herself. Perhaps that was the truest connection between species, the desire to understand, to bridge the gap between self and other, on the observation deck. She gazed down at the volcanic surface of Dragana 7, its red-hued landscape no longer seeming quite so alien. Somewhere down there was a civilization they had nearly overlooked, a sapient species with its own history, culture, and perspective. Not monsters, she whispered to herself, just scholars like us. In the reflection of the viewport, she caught a glimpse of six-toed footprints forming in the condensation on the glass. There one moment, gone the next, and knew that the learning had only just begun.